Welcome to the last installment of the Ultimate Homestead Designing Guide. Today we're going to talk about how you can make those dream designs come to life. Permaculture design can seem daunting, but if you lay it out step by step, anything can happen. Let's get growing. Hello and welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast, the show that talks about growing a garden, a homestead, a healthy family, and most importantly, growing closer to God. I'm your host, Crystal Media, owner of the Red Ridge Farm Homestead, where our mission is to help women of faith find the courage to grow healthy food for their family while building a closer relationship with our Lord and Savior. If that's you, don't let the world hold you back. Pray, just plant. Welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Media, and today in Season 6, Episode 12, we're going to be wrapping up our series we've been covering here on the podcast and on the blog about the Ultimate Homestead Design Guide. We've been talking about, through Season 6, we've been talking about how we can use permaculture design to create more abundance on our homestead, in our garden, in our family, and in our life, essentially. That it was the goal of this guide, the goal of this series. So we've talked about what permaculture is, we've talked about the principles, the tenets of permaculture, and a few ideas of how you can bring that permaculture design to your homestead. But now that you have the ideas, now that you have a little idea of what you want to do, maybe some dreams have been laid out, how do we take action? How do we go to that next step from taking an idea to making it real life? Because the idea part is easy. It was easy for me to share the ideas we use here. It was easy for me to come up with the ideas to use here. But making those ideas come to life, putting them into action, making goals, moving forward step by step, that's the hard part. So that's what we're going to be talking about today to kind of wrap up this series of how you as a grower can move from the idea stage to the action stage, to that growing stage, and implementing a few of the design ideas that you decided that you're going to use on your homestead or in your garden or in your family or in your life. I do want to say really quick that this feeling of having all these ideas and not knowing how to go to that next step, it's going to feel overwhelming, and it is absolutely okay to feel overwhelmed. I myself have felt that. I myself am currently feeling that. We've been having some ideas about how we want to not only add beef, which we did last year, we added 2 cows to our property, but how we want to move forward with that. How are we going to now change up our grazing plan to accommodate these beeves? And what are we going to do in this next month, in the next 2 weeks, in tomorrow to cultivate this idea of bringing beef on our property and handling this new adventure? And it's going to take time. I know it's not going to be a quick process. I know that it's going to be a process for sure. And it's going to be one that I'm going to be learning as well as doing. And sometimes those processes, those ideas, when we go to put them into action, when we're learning at the same time, can seem overwhelming. The biggest thing that you need to do to get started on that is you need to make a plan. You need to write, that's what our first thing is here. You need to write your goals down. A plan can make the biggest dreams come true as long as you have something wrote down. When you start by writing all your goals down and ideas down in one place, you are releasing them from this little place you've been trying to keep in your brain. What I like to call a brain dump or a dream dump. You're trying to get those ideas out of your head so then you can start making a plan for them. You can start laying things out. To do this, you just need to start with a blank piece of paper or a blank screen, however you like to write. And it can be just a simple list, and it doesn't have to be organized right now. It can just be ideas. And spend about 20 minutes on each topic. So here's an example. So if you're thinking about adding a dairy to your farm, use that time, use that 20 minutes to only think about that dairy. Think about all the things that you're going to need to purchase, the things you're going to need to do, the things that you're going to need to plan to make that one aspect, that adding a dairy to your farm, come to life. You want to be thinking about, will you be putting up a barn or a shelter? How big of barn and shelter are you going to need? Are you going to do dairy goats for your dairy? Are you going to do dairy cows? Or are you going to do dairy sheep? What is your ideas there? And maybe you haven't chosen one yet. So write all 3 of them down and say, I'm going to research this as an idea that you're going to do. I'm going to research which dairy animal I want to bring to my farm. And when you narrow it down to you want to do goats, now you need to decide what breed you need to be thinking about. So write down a few breeds that you know. And you need to be thinking about feed and where you're going to store your feed. And this list can go on, and I think you see that. But if you give yourself about 20 minutes, it may go a little bit longer than that. But on one topic, you can get all of the ideas out. And in a way, by getting all those ideas out, you can begin to start making a plan. And then once you get that figured out, if you have another idea of adding rainwater to your property, spend 20 minutes thinking about that one and getting all the little details and the hurdles that might stop you from doing it is another thing that you could be thinking about. I just listened to a great podcast by Justin Rhodes. Yes, he started a podcast, but in this podcast, he talks a little bit more about his business side of how he makes money through his YouTube and things. I don't know if you guys know Justin Rhodes, but I will put a link down to his vlog below. But he talks about how it's easy to have the idea, but it's harder to have it come to life. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. But what he talked about is if you sit down and you start writing out all the things that you're going to need to do, if you hit something that is a hurdle, that maybe is something that isn't going to make this dream a reality, that's okay, because that means that dream just needs to be changed a little bit, or you need to come up with a different idea. We had this idea actually a few years ago. We wanted to put a reservoir on our property. Well, after we watched the water flow on our property, looked at elevations and things on our property, and we'd found out that where we would need to put a reservoir or a pond would be in this valley, but this valley was also connected to our neighbor. So we had the idea and we went through the steps to do it, to kind of not really do it, but get all the things on paper that we would need to do to make this idea come forth. And we had to decide that we couldn't do this. Because number one, I didn't want to have to try to go to my neighbor, either to get an easement or to redo the fence where this reservoir was going to be, or even if my neighbor would want to do this, because his land is more recreational. It's not for a homestead type of project. If we ever expanded, that was a property we'd probably buy, and then maybe we could put that reservoir in. But having an idea is going to get you moving forward. And if you do this brain dump, you're going to be listing out all of these things that you're going to need to do. And if it comes to one that can't be done this year, maybe it's a big hurdle like building a barn for your dairy. Well, then you can see, well, this is still an idea, but this may not be an idea I can get done this year. Or maybe part of this idea, I can get the first section done. I can get all the research done. I can get all the numbers figured out. I can figure out how much a barn would cost me. I can figure out how much, if I went into dairy goats, what kind of dairy goats are around this area, and actually go visit some dairy farms and go visit and get my hands on a goat, or maybe even go volunteer on a homestead and say, hey, can you teach me how to milk a goat? Or those kind of things can also be done maybe if you come to a hurdle. But if you get them all wrote down, you will have a place to go. You will have something to think about. On a side note here, I do want to say that if one of your goals is to add animals to your homestead, you need to start with infrastructure first. Yes, you can research the animals. You can figure out how much feed they were going to eat and all of those things. But when you're bringing animals to your homestead, it is better for you and it is better for that animal to have a shelter and a pen before they arrive. It is really easy, and my kids tried to do this to us too. It was really easy to be like, oh, these goats are so cute. And we went ahead and purchased the goats, but thankfully they were still on their mom. So we had a couple weeks to get things in order. But in truth, if you're thinking about doing something with animals, you need to get that infrastructure done first. Because An animal, when you go and visit them at their home, may seem calm, may seem like an awesome animal. But when you bring them home and you unload them from your trailer or out of your truck or out of the back of your van like we've done before, they are in a new place. And they're going to be scared and they're going to be frightened. And the best thing you can do for them is to create a safe place for them to be. Create a pen that has proper fencing around it. You don't want to be putting them way out on pasture yet because they just don't know the area. So you're creating a smaller area that they can either winter there would be really easy, but it's just a secure place that's going to have shelter, going to have their water already set up, going to have their feed already set up. So when they are feeling anxious, when they're feeling scared, they have a safe place to go, and you can feel confident leaving that animal to get used to its environment without you having to be there, without you having to always go out and check, oh, did they get out? Or, oh, did they break this fence down because I didn't build it very well? This kind of reminds me of one of my favorite movies growing up. Maybe this kind of shows my age, but it's a Kevin Costner movie. It's, I think it's Field of Dreams or something. And he says, if you build it, he will come. That was kind of his little quote or phrase from that. And I'm not going to go into the details of that movie, but that's what it is like for animals. You need to build it first and then they will come, because if you try to do it without that infrastructure, if you try to do it in a slapdash pen that's just quickly put up and it's not safe and it's not going to hold a scared animal, then you're going to have accidents. You're going to have a runaway animal, or you're going to have someone getting hurt. Because when an animal is scared, just like you and me, they do two things. We either run or we fight. Animals do the same thing. So just a funny story where we recently went to a cattle sale close to us, and some of the cows came in really calm. And some of the cows came in on the fight. They're ready to take anyone. And my son asked, why do they do that? Why are they acting like that? Why are they acting so strange? And I said, that's how that animal deals with stress. Some animals are so used to dealing with stress that they really don't react anymore. That's an older animal, older milk cow. If you're a newer person getting into a dairy, that's something that you need to be probably looking at. But even an older milk cow, even an older animal that you think might be good at handling stress, something may stress her out just a little bit different, and she may switch from a calm animal to a frightened runaway animal where she'll jump a fence you would never think she would jump, or a frightened, hurt you first animal. And when you have those situations, having them in a secure pen that they can't jump out of because you built it properly is going to give not only you peace of mind, but it's going to give that animal peace of mind, because then you can leave it to calm down. You're not going to always have to be out there monitoring it 24 hours 7. Yes, you're going to be checking it, but it's going to be calm checks. It's not going to be frantic. Oh my gosh, she's just jumped out. Oh my gosh, the panel's cut in half. You know what I'm trying to say. Just make sure you're thinking about those animals too before you purchase them, because a scared animal is a danger to you and your family. I know that was a kind of a strange side note, but I do want you to think about that. I talk about that a lot in my what questions you should be asking yourself before you start a homestead. That it's just really important to be thinking about that if you're adding animals. So make sure you're writing your ideas down. Do they need to be yet into a fluent goal yet? No, they don't. They just need to be out of your head and onto a piece of paper, because the last thing you want to be doing is spinning. Your mind spinning and spinning and spinning, thinking about this, and then you're thinking about this, and then you're thinking about that. To stop the spinning, the easiest way to stop it is to just get it out of your head and get it on a piece of paper. So then you can think about each individual thing and not just keep spinning your circles. I know when I can't sleep at night. I know when I have tons of ideas rushing through my head. The Lord delivers them very fluently in February when I can't get much sleep. I have to just get up and I have to write it down and get them out of my head, and then I can calm down, because I'm not having to try to remember it. I'm not trying to have to try to remember to recall it. I'm not doing all that stuff. My brain quits spinning, and I know that I can think about it later because I've got it wrote down. That's what this idea is for. So you could get your ideas, your dreams out on a piece of paper. The next step is you need to make your goals. Once you start changing those ideas, once you start changing those steps into goals, you need to make them manageable. You need to be thinking about you, your family, your homestead, and thinking about the limits that you have on your time and your resources. What we always do here at the homestead is we make goals, and I have a big, long list of goals, probably 20 some goals that I would love to accomplish here on the homestead. Am I going to do all 20 of those this year? No, I'm going to pick 2 or 3 that I know I can get done this year. And if we get more done, then a pat on my back. But if we don't, if we only get the ones that we set out to do, I'm still going to celebrate. I'm still going to be happy that I got those done. Our goals for 2022 were to put in a raspberry patch. That's our growing goal or our new plant goal. And then as for infrastructure goal, we're putting in paths and cement sidewalks to our home to start managing mud and those types of things on the homestead so that we can actually get from the parking lot to the house easier when we're packing groceries or packing feed bags, or we can get down to the barns easier with mulch paths, or around the house easier with mulch paths, because when I go out to milk, I go out our back door, I go around the house, and I go straight over to the barn. I want to mulch in that path so that doing chores on a rainy day like today would still be easier, because I can still put my tennis shoes on and still go out and do chores because I'm walking on a mulch path. It's easier for us to pack in groceries, because sometimes if I have a big grocery load haul, I usually buy groceries once a month is our big grocery haul, and then the second week of the month is our light grocery haul. We just pick up the fresh things that we need. But that first one of the month is where I'm restocking the pantry and all of those things. So we like to get a wheelbarrow out, or a wagon, or even a sled in the winter, and having a concrete path to go from our parking lot to the mudroom door, or even to our front door. We have lived in this home for 13 years now, and we still do not have a fluent path to our beautiful front door that we paid more money for than the other door, but we use that all the time because that goes to the mudroom. But we would like to get access to that front door. We would like to start using that, and it comes down to making concrete paths to it. And that's that infrastructure goal that we have for this year for the yard. And then for out in the pasture and on the homestead, we have building up some fences that need repaired. So we have ideas of putting in some new posts and some new fences to kind of keep goats in, not just horses in. So that was that goal for the homestead. So as you can see, I'm breaking apart my goals, and I'm making them manageable for each kind of section of my growing journey. So I have the plant section, what plants I'm going to be putting in. I have the yard infrastructure, and then I have the homestead infrastructure. And the last thing that I'm hoping that we get done, this is a hope we get done goal, is I would like to move the raised beds from my lower garden up behind the house and make a kitchen garden and add a few more raised beds. That is an additional goal after we get the 3 other main goals done. Now, my list is a lot longer than that. You know it is. But those are the ones we're going to work on this year. And if we get those 3 done, we'll move on to the 4th one. And if we get that 4th one done, then I'm going to have to go look at my list again and just see what we can do. Or it may be even taking a vacation because we need it. But make your list manageable. This is not a race. And if it was, you want to be the tortoise. The tortoise wins every single time. So you want to take this thing slowly. Growing takes time. Adding design aspects to your homestead are going to take time. And they're going to take not only time, but they're going to take time to develop as well. A forest is not grown in a year, but over a span of years. And this is same true for a food forest. If you're thinking about adding a food forest to your homestead, well, maybe this year you're only putting in the first foundational trees. And next year you'll put in the bushes. And then the next year you'll put in the ground cover. That's what we're doing this year. So about 3 years ago, we put in our apple trees, the main trees that go along our fedge. And if you want to learn more about a fedge, be sure to check out the Permaculture Orchard post that I will put in the description below, so you can go check that out, and it'll be in the show notes. But we planted our apple trees. Last year we put in our bushes. I got some fruit bushes that we could put in below those trees. And this year, my job and hope in that food forest, the goal for that food forest only, was to expand the beds just a little bit and put in some strawberries. So I guess strawberries are also on that raspberry patch plant growth thing. It was a goal that we set 2 or 3 years ago that we broke down into a 3 to 5 years, depending on how the weather goes and things on how we get things developed. But we set out a 3 to 5 year goal for our food forest. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It was a goal that we set 3 years ago that year we're putting in the trees. The next year we're putting in the bushes, and this year we're focusing on a fruit ground cover. And next year, I believe we're focusing on vines. So you can see how that progresses. So don't hesitate to take your time and to break your goals down into manageable chunks. Also for this year, make it manageable. Make it something that you can be at the end of the year and be proud that you succeeded instead of discouraged that you didn't get everything done because your list was too long. The next step is you do not want to hesitate. When you meet a hurdle in your brain dump that you did earlier, don't hesitate to push yourself to do something new. Don't hesitate to go out of your comfort zone. But take those other ideas into account also. Be thinking about if this is a goal that's going to push yourself, don't completely say, no, I'm not going to do it. Stop and start breaking it down. Growing is intended to push ourselves. That's what growing is. It's to change ourselves from who we are. As you listen to this podcast episode, you are going to be a different person than you will be right now at the end of this episode because you're going to have different ideas. You're going to have different thoughts. Growing is a constant changing of ourselves. It's a constant changing of our property. It's a constant changing in our garden, in our life, in our homestead. So when we want to do new things, we are sometimes going to have to push ourselves. I kind of introduced in this episode, we talked about how sometimes that step of doing something new and learning alongside of that takes courage, takes effort. That's what we're talking about. That when it comes to that decision of, oh, I can't do this because it's going to be beyond me. It's going to be beyond who I am right now. I just want you to remember that maybe who you are right now is ready to be who you will be after you are done accomplishing that goal or dream. Growing takes effort and it takes time, but you have to be willing to do and experience the unknown to make your dreams come true. You are growing every minute of every day. When you learn something new about homesteading, when you listen to a different podcast episode, when you bring new ideas into your mind, you are growing, you are expanding. And yes, I am not saying that it's going to be easy, but if you make a manageable list, like I said before, if you break down that goal into all of its little pieces, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you will be able to push through. You'll be able to go out of your comfort zone and learn as well as grow at the same time. Because that's what God intended you to do. He intended you to move forward and grow with every aspect of your life. Now we're going to get back to that growing. We're going to get back to talking about our goals and how we can make our goals and dreams on the homestead come to life in just a moment. But now it is time for the tips and tricks segment of this episode where I share a few bonus tips and tricks I use here at Red Ridge Farm. This week's tip is brought to you by the Building Soil Health Handbook. This handbook was designed to help you take the guessing out of improving your soil, to help you become the expert your soil has been waiting for you to be. Many of us think that we're gardeners of vegetables and gardeners of fruits, but we're not. We are stewards of the soil. In this handbook, I walk you through the 4 steps I've used here at the farm to improve my soil. I want to help you become the expert that you never realized you could be. To grab your free copy, go to redridgefarm.org/resources. My tip for you this week is to put perennials in your garden plan. A lot of the times a garden plan focuses on just the annuals that we're growing, the tomatoes, the carrots, the lettuce, the things that we need to fill our larder. But there's also perennials that can fill our larder. I personally, this year, it's our goal to get a raspberry patch planted this year. And do you know where it's going? It's going in my garden because I have found planting perennials around my homestead that if I don't keep the perennials present and in my plan or in my visuals, day-to-day tasks where I see it a lot, they don't get taken care of as well. And having them in the garden or close to the garden is going to do two things. Perennials are also going to attract more bees, more insects to help pollinate and create more abundance in your garden. Perennials can also be flowers. You don't have to just think about food. It can be flowers. And a lot of perennials that I do around my garden, and they're more in my yard, but the border of my garden is all roses. That is also a perennial, but they're part of my garden plan because I need to water them. I need to care for them. I need to fertilize them. I need to remulch them every year. So having them part of my garden plan makes them present in my mind, and they're on my to-do list so that I don't forget to water the trees. We're adding even a food forest on the northern end of our garden, not this year, but hopefully next year. I have it all planned out. I wanted to focus on raspberries this year. I have learned over the years you want to get one thing you're focusing on and get it well established before you move on to something else. We're also still building our food forest that's in our yard. I've got the trees established. I've gotten the shrubs established. And this year we're wanting to put in more of the cover crop. I'm thinking maybe even strawberries, but right now this year, I'm not putting in the plants, but I'm building the infrastructure for beds around the trees and the shrubs so that I can build those. We're putting paths in next to this area. So this year's all focused on building those perennials, beds. But having your perennials in your garden plan is going to help you keep track of them. A garden plan is beyond a small drawing. A garden plan should help you with everyday tasks. It should help you from year to year. And if you want to learn more about a garden plan, check out how I make a basic garden plan. Check out my basic garden planning masterclass. It just launched last month. It's brand new. And this masterclass just walks you through the steps of making a basic garden plan that includes perennials, but also includes so much more than just a simple drawing. It is designed to help you make a garden plan that goes beyond just a simple drawing to help you keep track of more, to create more abundance, to create more in your garden. And perennials should be part of that garden plan. We are talking about goals. We are talking about how we can make our dreams come true and how we can go beyond ourselves and sometimes move out of our comfort zone to make these dreams come true. And that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel worried. There's just a few steps that you can follow that will help you get through this process. Number one that we've already talked about is that you're wanting to get those ideas out of your head. You're wanting to make a list that is manageable and you're wanting to push yourself. It's going to be okay to push yourself. The next thing, once you get those goals wrote down, is to be specific. Goals are essentially a plan, so you need to make them specific. How many trees are you going to add to that food forest? Or how many goats are you going to add to your dairy? Knowing these details will help your goals unfold. You'll know how big of a barn or shelter you need to build, and so much more. And also think about the future too. If you think that your pasture, this is an example here, and it kind of goes off that example I shared earlier about the dairy. If you think that your pasture can raise about 5 dairy goats, then you need to build a barn that can function for 5 dairy goats and their babies. This will allow you to start small, but not need to redo your infrastructure to expand your herd. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you build your infrastructure first, which we already talked about, and you build the barn for your max capacity, then does that mean you need to start with your max capacity? No, it doesn't. It means that you can start with just a few goats and grow. That's what we've done here at the homestead. And I have reached now, it has taken me 5 or 6 years, but I have now reached my max capacity. And I'm okay with it because I started out small. I pushed myself to learn how to milk a goat. I then purchased my first 2 goats because goats don't do very well by themselves. And then I learned to milk. One of my goats was in milk. Then the next year, 2 goats were in milk. And now this year, I have 2 goats in milk and 3 babies that will be in milk next year. But 2 years ago, I had 4 goats in milk. So I slowly got used to adding that. But when I built my infrastructure, I built for those 5 goats so that I knew that's what I eventually wanted to do, but that doesn't mean I had to start with that. Here's another example though. When you are specific with your goals, you can break them down into steps. Like my goal I told you was for planting the raspberry patch. So instead of just saying plant raspberry patch, my goal says my goal for 2022 is to set up, plant, mulch, irrigate a raspberry patch of primo cane raspberries in the lower section of my garden by May 2022. By being specific, I can see from this goal, just this simple sentence of my goal, where I will be putting my patch, what steps I need to do. I need to make the beds, I need to plant them, I need to mulch, I need to set up irrigation. I even have what type of raspberries I'm going to be ordering, so I already can purchase those because I know which type they are. I can be going in and looking at different websites. I did this back in February when I was ordering my raspberries. I had a step-by-step plan kind of already in that goal because I was specific. And we're going to talk about breaking down goals in a minute, so I don't want to go too deeply into that. But can you see, by having that goal being specific, by having that goal state all of the things that I need to do, as well as the deadline, May 2022, which, thank the Lord, I have gotten them in the ground, and I'm setting up the irrigation this weekend. So I'm on target for this goal. It's middle of May that this episode is airing. So I am accomplishing it. But that goal was specific so that I could just simply look at the goal. And even when I went to go write the to-do list, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And we're going to talk about breaking it down into a to-do list in just a moment. But the next thing I want you to do, after you get your goals specific, before you start really breaking them down, I want you to tell others. You need to share your goal with others. Accountability is a huge asset when it comes to moving forward with your goals. You can tell your husband or your family, but I also encourage you to reach out to others trying to accomplish like-minded goals like you are. Having a friend who understands what it feels like when homesteading goals don't go as planned is priceless. For one thing, you might find a mentor, or better yet, a person you can show the ropes to. But whoever you find, share your goals with them is going to help you in multiple ways. Number one, it's going to give you someone out of your everyday to bounce ideas off of. They're going to be able to see your project or goal from a different perspective. They may see the flaws in your plan and help you tweak them out, or they may have an idea that you may have never thought of. I do this all the time with a friend of mine, and she does it with me. When we were doing this beef plan, we thought the farms around us sell cattle, some calve in spring, some calve in summer, some calve in fall. And I didn't know what kind of cattle I wanted to buy. What kind of system did I want to do? Did I want to calve in early spring? And early spring for us is like February, March, which is really cold. And the other was fall. And then the other was the summer. And so how did I want to run my system? So I ran my ideas off of my friend. And she said, well, I think the reason a lot of people do the fall is because then their calves are a little bit bigger coming into the next year. But then I talked to my dad, and he's been in the cattle business a lot more than I have. And when I talked to him about the idea and how I was kind of struggling with deciding on how we wanted to do things, he said, well, the biggest downfall of fall births is moms are just now having babies and then they're going on to hay. Hay is not as nutrient dense as the fresh spring grasses or the summer grasses. So you're going to have more problems with maybe sicknesses and things with your calves if you calve in the fall. And I was like, okay, well, that's a good thought. And then he also said, well, if you calve too early in the spring, you can still calve in the spring, but doesn't have to be February, March. What about April, May? April, May, and it's going to give you a little more time to, number one, those calves, it's not going to be so cold for the calves to be born. Number two, those calves will be born, and shortly after that, in May and June, the grass is going to increase. So when that cow is now lactating and supporting a cow, is going to be getting really good nutrients. And I said, yes, that makes so much more sense. Each one has their benefits. Spring calving, summer calving, fall calving, all have their benefits. But by talking to other people, it helped me work out what the benefits were of each and what were the downfalls of each. So then I could make a more intelligent answer. Plus, also talking to him, and talking to a few other people, they're like, well, how are you going to run your 4 cows and not have a bull? And I was like, oh, yeah, I need to be thinking about artificial insemination. I need to be thinking about how I'm going to get a hold of somebody to do that for me. Am I going to be thinking about cedars and those types of things? So having that other person to bounce my ideas off not only brought in a different perspective, but helped me choose an idea, but they even brought in other things that I need to be thinking about because they've been thinking about them too, or they've been in an experience where they've been thinking about them, or many other things. Number 2 of telling others is when you tell others about your goals, they will give you accountability. They will be able to call you out when you're not reaching your goals you set, or even remind you of the goals you may put on the back burner. I know I have done this with one of my friends. She has been talking about building a passive solar greenhouse. When she brought it up, she didn't really know the name of it, but she's like, I want to really put a greenhouse, something that would last the winter. And I said, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I read this wonderful book. You want to read this book? And she's like, yes, I want to read that book. So I let her borrow the book, and she's all deep in the crevices. And then she happened to have to put that goal on the back burner last year. And so I asked her this year, I said, when are you going to put your passive solar greenhouse in? And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot that was in our plan to do it this year. I'm going to have to go back to the budget and see what we can do. So that helped her remember and give her accountability that that's what she wanted, that was something she wanted to do this year. And so when I reminded her, and we do this all the time with each other, is I'll send a message to her and be like, I pulled the cedar on such and such, and one, it gives me a thing, but she'll remind me, okay, now that you've done that, you need to do such and such. So having someone to do accountability with is priceless. Another one is they will help you with your goals. If you need a few extra hands to complete a project, they should be the first ones on your list to call. So when she's going to be building that greenhouse, I told her, I said, I want to come help you. I want to be here to support you while you build this greenhouse. Or vice versa, when I first started really getting into AIing and things with the cows and the goats, she said, I want to come help you. I want to come learn how to AI cows with you. Having that accountability, not only is someone that can come help you, but they can come learn with you. And that's just amazing. The last thing that telling others does is they can celebrate your wins with you too. A lot of times as growers, we forget to give ourselves that pat on the back when we have achieved something in our growing journey. Do we need to gloat? No, but all jobs well done should be acknowledged for at least the hard work you put forth. You did it. So you should celebrate. And not only should you celebrate with your little happy dance, but you should be celebrating with your family and doing a family happy dance. And then you should be celebrating with that person that you told that you were going to do this goal. Then you can invite them over and say, hey, you want to come look at my greenhouse and see how nice it looks and see the ideas I put here and and get the grand tour and have a dinner together and celebrate this accomplishment that may have taken you, like my food forest, may have taken you 5 years to get to. It's time to celebrate, and it's important to celebrate. And with that idea, I want another way that you can do this, how you can find someone to connect with. And maybe that's connecting with me. And I would love to be your accountability partner. That would be so cool. But I have been thinking over the past couple months about how I could do this, not only for myself, but for others. So I have set up the Red Ridge Farm Fellowship of Fellow Growers Facebook page. And I would love to invite you to come join us, because growing can be a lonely process, but it shouldn't be. And I hope that this Facebook group will bring growers just like you and me together so that we can support and encourage each other. So if you would like to join the group or even check it out, be sure to check out the link in the description and in the show notes. Now, I've been mentioning description and show notes. So the description is what you see down below this podcast episode, where you can see a few links, my social media tags, a little description about what this podcast episode is about. But the show notes are where you can dive in deeper. The show notes is where I've actually taken this podcast episode and turned it into a blog post. You wanted notes? Well, I have notes already written for you, so you can easily go back and remember all the things that we've been talking about through this podcast episode. And on top of that, I connect to many other blog posts, even other podcast episodes that can help you dive into this aspect a little bit deeper. So now we're talking about breaking those goals down. So we talked about how you need to make them very specific. And after you make them specific, you tell others. So now let's break these goals down. Many times when we make design goals on the homestead, they can feel huge and overwhelming. Of all the things I hope you learn from this podcast episode is that I want you to learn and internalize this one statement. All things can be broken down into smaller things. Big goals can be broken down into medium goals. Medium goals can be broken down into small goals into tiny goals, and tiny goals into daily tasks. And I can go on and on and on, daily tasks into hourly things. I could go on and on there. But I think you see what I'm trying to say. Every goal can seem like a huge, daunting task. But if you take just a few minutes to break it down into digestible pieces, anything can be accomplished. In fact, here's a quote from me: "A mountain is climbed one step at a time, not one mountain at a time." So let's break that down. Let's make an example of this. We've been talking about my raspberry patch. I gave you that specific goal. Let me restate it for you. My goal for 2022 is to set up, plant, mulch, irrigate a raspberry patch of primo cane raspberries in the lower section of my garden by May 2022. Now I can take that goal and I can break it down into parts. Number 1, I can order my raspberry plants. 2, collect cardboard and mulch material. 3, purchase irrigation system. 4, build beds. 5, plant raspberry plants. 6, plant irrigation. 7, place mulch. 8, create a watering schedule. 9, create a harvest schedule. So can you see how you can take that very specific goal, because it already has a few things in there, and break it down into easier steps? And what I did is I broke each of these down through the months and the weeks building up into May. So February is when I pre-ordered my raspberry plants. February and March is when I started actually way back in December, because Christmas brings tons of cardboard boxes, I started saving up my cardboard boxes. In March, I started researching what kind of irrigation system I wanted to put in. I have my list. I haven't purchased it yet, but I have my list. We went and built the beds in April. Just the first week of May, I planted my raspberry patch and we placed the mulch. Now we need to go purchase the irrigation and place the irrigation into it. And then the next step is I need to create a watering schedule. I need to figure out, one, with the irrigation, I think I'm going to be doing drip line, how often I need to water for those raspberry plants, especially the first year that they're getting initialized. And then I need to see, this year I probably won't be harvesting anything, but I can watch those plants to see when they start to flower and see when they start to maybe make fruit, so that I can create a harvesting schedule for next year. So all of those things come together, and I didn't do them all in 1 week. I spread them out over 5 months. I hope you see what I'm trying to say here, that everything can be broken down into smaller pieces. And we're going to get into my last 3 tips for you in just a moment. But right now it's time for the Growing with God segment, where you and I build that relationship with our Lord and Savior. We're going to be continuing our series on confidence in the Lord. We are in a time of turmoil, and the Lord is there for us. I'm going to be reading out of Psalms 118, verses 6 through 7. The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? The Lord is with me. He is my helper. I look in triumph on my enemies. Now, this psalm was written by David, and David had a very turmoil life. Not only was he king, but he was also tracked and chased, and many times Saul tried to kill him. And he put his faith in God. He put his faith in the Lord. That's why he became king. That's why God chose him as king. But we, on our growing journey, can have the same confidence that David had. The Lord is with you. You will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? That's verse 6. With God on our side, we can have the confidence to stand firm in our faith. He is beyond all that can happen, all that can stop us from believing in Him. All of this turmoil, all of this strife, He is beyond that. He is beyond mere mortals. Yes, the things in the world that are happening because it is the time for them to happen, but God is still on the throne. He is still there. And we can have confidence that He is above what's happening here on earth. He is timeless. He is the Alpha. He is the Omega. He is the beginning. He is the end. He is all. And not only is He all, but He thinks about you. He is ready to help you and guide you. The Lord is with you. I want you to remember this week, that you are not alone in this strife. You are not alone in this turmoil of this world. The Lord is with you. We are talking about making our dreams on the homestead, our homestead design dreams come true. And we've been talking about how we can easily write our goals down, make a brain dump, make our goals list manageable, push ourselves beyond ourselves, because we as a person are always growing. And we need to be specific with our goals. We need to tell others so we can celebrate, right? And we need to break those goals down, because a goal, what's my quote? A mountain is climbed one step at a time, not one mountain at a time. So let's talk about the hardest step. We're still kind of in that stage of we're getting everything wrote down. And we talked about in the beginning of this episode how our goal for this episode was to get you from the writing it down idea stage to the doing action stage. And that's what we're going to be talking about with these last 3 tips. That action stage. Now we've got everything broke down into a plan. Now we need to take action. So the next thing is you just need to get started. You need to not let your list of goals, design ideas, and dreams just sit in your imagination or on a piece of paper. You can make them come to life if you just start. The motto we have here on the homestead is pray, just plant. And if you're listening to the podcast, which you are, you know that's also the title of this podcast. What this means is every day we start with a prayer to our Lord and an action plan. We ask for guidance for our plan, and then we just start. I think this is the hardest step of a homestead design or a growing journey, because it's easy to make the plan. It's easy to take out a piece of paper and a pencil and write things out and put it in step-by-step things. But it takes guts, it takes courage, it takes strength to get ourselves off the sideline and into the game. And that is why an initial part of succeeding on your growing journey is to include the Lord in your plans. He loves and only wants the good for you, and He will help you find the courage you need to take the first steps up that mountain you see in front of you. So remember, as you stand there staring at that long list of goals and dreams, that you are not alone. God is there ready and willing to give you His strength so that you can take that first step. And we already talked about telling others, correct? That is going to give you that accountability. But when you're lacking, when you are feeling that discouragement, when you're feeling that fright, when you're feeling like you're doing this alone, I want you to remember that you are not. Even when you're standing in your pasture, all alone with your goats or the ideas running through your head, you are not alone. God is there giving you those ideas. God is there to walk this path with you. And He is more than willing to give you His strength so that this first step, this just starting, can be easier, can be a transition that may not feel so daunting. And yes, of course, I want to be there for you. And yes, of course, you can tell others. But sometimes you're going to need just a little bit more. In fact, me personally, every day, I need that little bit more. So before I go out and plant the raspberry patch, I say a silent prayer to myself. Before I go and I'm going to purchase that irrigation, I say a silent prayer and ask for wisdom. I ask for wisdom that I'm picking the right tools and things that I need, or that I'm willing to listen to others and bring their ideas into account. Because that wisdom that God may be giving you is that other person telling you, I'm not sure if that exact plan is going to work. Or that it could be that person that's saying, hey, I saw this YouTube channel and he's doing exactly what you're doing. And what if you watch this video and that might help you get started, or that might help you come up with ideas. God is there ready and willing to give you his strength so that you can take that first step. You are never, ever taking that first step or just starting alone. And a small side note here is, of course, that the title of this podcast is Pray Just Plant. And it's because the reason I gave it that title, the reason it's so important that you pray and just plant, is because I want to make sure that you know that you are not alone. You either are taking me along with you with the ideas, the knowledge that I have, the things that I can teach you how to do through your earbuds, or you're taking God along with you on this growing journey. You're doing both. By sitting here and listening to this episode, you are doing both. You are taking me and the Lord along with you on your growing journey. And I want to thank you for including me. But I want you to always remember that the Lord is there for you. So just reach out to him when you're feeling that trepidation about starting. The next thing I want to say to you is that I know this has been a lot to take in, but I only have one more thing for you to think about when it comes to making your goals come true. And that is to always keep moving forward every day. Change on the homestead is going to take time, and the things on your list may not materialize in a moment, but over consistent moments of momentum, over consistent moments of growing 1% at a time. You're not just a grower. You're also a mother, a wife, a homemaker, maybe even a husband. You are so much more than just a homesteader, just a person who grows plants. Sometimes it will feel like the homestead dreams will never be accomplished, but I'm here to tell you, if you constantly work on your goals every day, you will see results. And that slow and steady progress will win you that race. This process does not need to grow in leaps and bounds and overnight, like this consumer idea we have in our society, or this instant gratification like we have in our society. It's not going to do that. But instead, with a steady daily commitment to moving forward 1% or one step at a time, you can do this. You can make those goals on your piece of paper, those dreams that you have in your imagination, you can make them come true. It only needs to take 1% of a day. That 1% can be huge when added up over time. And that essentially should be your true everyday goal. That every single day you're going to work for that 1%. That's our goal. Yes, I have those big overlapping goals. I see those at the top of my piece of paper every single day. And in fact, in that one of those podcast episodes that I listened to with Justin Rhodes, he says he sits down every single day and he makes a to-do list with that one top goal in line. And if that top goal is plant raspberries, then you can make out your weekly to-do list or your daily to-do list to say, okay, my goal for today is to plant raspberries. What do I need to do to make that happen? What is 1% thing that I can make sure that I get this done by the end of the week or the end of the month? And you can write down your to-do list. Maybe it's picking your raspberries. Maybe it's researching if you want primocane or permacane. All of those things can be done 1% at a time. And when you do that, when you commit to daily growth, you're going to change the world. You're going to change yourself, your family, your homestead, your garden, your life. You will be on a road of change. And that change will get you what you want. That will get you to the top of the mountain. So, on that very last emotional note, I want to thank you for joining me in this last installment of the Ultimate Homestead Design Guide. I hope, above all things, that I have taught you is that you are not alone on this journey, that there are others just like you and that the Lord is ready to walk down this growing path with you. He's just waiting for your invitation to join the journey. So again, I want to thank you for joining me. And if this is your first time with the Pray Just Plant podcast, I want to welcome you to the fellowship of fellow growers. And I hope and pray that you feel that you are welcome at our Facebook page and here at the Pray Just Plant podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information about this topic. And as always, don't let the world hold you back. Pray, just plant.